Close enough.
Yeah.
Okay, welcome to Weather Report, where we are showing you meta decks, giving you lists, and giving you an idea of what you're going to be playing against in the Trinity Cup. Meep, you want to talk about Dragon Rulers?
Yes. So I have two lists to go over, but the main one that I want to focus on is 60 cards. Um, I can't say for sure that the 60 card variant is definitely the most optimal, but with a deck like Dragon Rulers, there's a couple of reasons why you actually really need to go bigger. The main reason being that to summon the Dragon Rulers, you have to keep banishing dragons from your graveyard. So it's like a two-part strategy, right? So you have to get a lot of mill, and a lot of that mill has to be dragons. So that makes it difficult because the cards that mill you are not dragons. So you need to run a lot of cards that mill you, and then a lot of dragons in addition to that. So let's just go over a few of the main engines here. So for the actual rulers themselves, because this is 60, I'm just playing um, two of every ruler that I can play two of, and then one blaster. I think blaster is actually cuttable in this version for another co-forbidden card, but I like playing blaster, so I'm still playing blaster.
Cutting blaster. That's horrifying.
I mean, there might be a different co-forbidden card that's actually better. Just because it's not amazing, but I think Blaster's still really good. It's a 2800 beater. Um, yeah, you never actually get to use its hand effect though, ever, unless you're discarding Ash, but that's probably not great. Yeah, so outside that, the main the main dragon engine in the deck, besides the Dragonlers themselves, are the Blue Eyes engine, which I cut to just 4 cards, which is the 2 stones, Dragon Spirit, and Blue Eyes itself. Um, you can play a bigger Blue Eyes deck, but I find that in a large deck, you don't want to be doing that. If you're going to be playing Blue Eyes, you need to be playing a small, dedicated Blue Eyes strategy of like maybe 40 cards. Um, just because alternative is a huge brick unless you actually have consistent ways to always be opening with Blue Eyes in your hand. And in a big deck where your focus is milling, that's just not the case. So, yeah, 4 cards is nice just because both the stones are really good mills and they're tuners, so they help you get into your they help you get into Omega, and they help you get into Red Dragon Archfiend and Chambara, and they're generally decent. Also, you can start plays with just a stone and into Link Karibo. Um, yeah. Other than that, I have a 2 card Red Eyes engine. This is very questionable. You could definitely take this out, um, but it just helps fill your grave with dragons. Red Eyes isn't a terrible beater, and if you choose to run Red Eyes Darkness Metal, this engine becomes a lot better because Red Eyes Flare Dragon, being a Gemini, doesn't count towards the summon limit.
Ooh, that's
Then,
spicy.
yeah, definitely.
Is this
Then
just sendable off of Dragon Shrine?
Yeah, and it gives you another thing to send off Dragon Shrine. I think usually when you're sending the off Dragon Shrine, you're either sending Blue Eyes if the White Stone Legend's already out, or you're sending one Alexandrite Dragon, which is that's my personal favorite dragon engine right now. So you run the 3 Alexandrite Dragon, then you run either 1 to 2 Rescue Rabbit and an Unexpected Die and a Painful Decision. What this does is you run a lot of it's sort of the bridge between the rank 4 Minerva side and the dragon side of things
Yeah, because this
because they're
is
level. Yeah,
it's very much it's both a Dragon Ruler deck and rank 4 because you use the Minerva from rank 4 to like enable the Dragon Ruler side.
yeah, for sure. I mean, this because I think there's different dragon decks that don't use rank 4, but I don't think that the dragon rulers are particularly good to focus on in those decks because they need so much fuel to do anything. And
Horrifying to hear. The Dragon Rulers are the worst card.
I mean, I wouldn't say they're the worst cards. In this particular variant, they're the best cards, and they're sort of the win con.
Oh no,
In,
certainly.
yeah, in other decks, they're the worst cards, and they're just sort of there as a little bit of extra damage. Then you summon them like once. Um, yeah, but definitely in this variant, we're focusing on getting the Dragon Rulers out, mostly because I like Dragon Rulers, and I think being able to get to the game state where you can spam these dudes every turn is good. It just takes a lot more setup than other dragon decks that can set up for one turn and then spam the board of Red Eyes, Darkness Metal, and Buddy Force. But that's just a completely different build. Yeah. So the Alexandrite Dragons, though, so they bridge that gap because the way that our rank 4 engine is set up is it's split between what I consider to be like rank 4 extenders and then your sort of like good level 4s. So the rank 4 extenders being dudes that sort of that you don't need to just spend your normal summon on to get into Minerva or some other rank 4. So that'd be like Tin Goldfish, Goblinberg, Dragon Shrine into Dark Worm, Kage
Right.
Tokage, things like that, right? And the nice thing about Alexandrite Dragon is having more normal monsters means that when you get one of those, then you can make a rank 4 and 2 summons. So that gives you a lot more leeway on your mill, because if you mill something like Trick Clown, then you can summon it. If you aren't going first, then you can summon a DragonRuler and hit for more damage. It just gives you a lot more flexibility in what you can do in your turn. And then also it gives you Rescue Rabbit and Unexpected Die as additional play starters, because both of those are rank 4s that just sort of skirt around your one normal summon, which is, I would say, a lot more relevant in this deck than in a lot of decks
Right.
in Trinity.
Do you usually send them right away off of Dragon Shrine if you haven't drawn your rabbit yet? Do you still just dump them to get an extra one in grade?
Usually, yeah, just because, I mean, maybe less so if I decide to run the second rabbit, but I'm leaning a bit more towards the second Dragon Shrine being the correct pick as a Trinity. And in that case, your chance of actually drawing rabbit and after turn 1 and not milling it is not super high, especially because Dragon Shrine is pretty much always going to get you into Minerva because you can mill out Dark Worm, and you just sort of want to, you don't want to draw these Alexandrite Dragons later after you get your rabbit or Unexpected Die play out or whatever. You just want to be milling them because they're just really good at filling your graveyard of dragons. Yeah. Other than that, the other big ratio, I guess, is the sort of like 3-to-1 monster to spell ratio, which is important because it just helps maximize your chance of milling monsters, specifically dragons. I believe I run something like 15 or 16 dragons in this deck, so that's a quarter of the deck being dragons, which means over the course of, say, Minerva milling 6 and then a few other things milling 2 or 3 or 4, you're going to end up filling your graveyard with dragons so you can make those big DragonRuler plays.
The 3-to-1 is also incredibly important for your Duel Link skill balance.
Exactly, because this is definitely Duel Links and not Trinity. I mean, 3 zones, 3 summons, it's about the same thing, isn't it?
When you think about it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I mean,
how would you rank the deck? Like how where do you think it falls in the meta?
I mean, this is definitely not the best deck in the meta. I'm under no illusion that it is. But I think that it's a good deck. I think that this deck is definitely somewhere in that, like, if we were to have like imaginary fighting game tiers or something like that, or if there maybe were huge events, I could see this being, say, like a mid to high tier 2 deck. Like, I don't see this being tier 1 just because I think that it isn't quite as dedicated to the rank 4 strategy as Minerva Sworn is, and it's not as dedicated to just murdering your opponent with huge dragons as like a Buddy Force dragon deck would be. So both those decks are better at a dedicated purpose, but what I like about this deck is that it has a lot more flex, and having that flexibility matters more in Trinity than it does in normal Yu-Gi-Oh! Because the games do actually last longer, and even against really good decks, if you can get those crucial turn 1 exchanges, you can turn it into a huge grind game. And DragonRuler is just really good in a grind game because if you play it right, you can be slowly metering out your DragonRulers and just swing in for big damage when you want. And you still have that rank 4 access to do big blowouts with Exciton Knight or control mid-game Tornado Dragon or something. Yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of room for the deck to still be optimized too. And I think that with some optimization and maybe like a few more like small hits to the top decks, this deck could continue rising in the meta.
Cool.
Now, I do want to ask something real quick, not to, belabor this deck, but it is a little sexy. Any reason why there's no Dragon Ravine in here?
Oh yeah. So the reason there's no Dragon Ravine or Future Fusion in general is because of the philosophy of blanking spell trap removal. So a lot of back row decks are the biggest decks in Trinity, and that's sort of been that way for a long time now. So
Guilty.
people all run a lot of back row removal. It's very common to see at least Cosmic Cyclone, Twin Twisters main deck, and now Heavy Storm Dusters Unlimited, so a lot of people are main decking that.
Yeah, it's at
So
least 3 to 4 pieces, because sometimes eccentric too if they're running the tour guide engine.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, you're seeing 3 to 5 pieces main decked and everything, and between the main and the side, it's a huge amount, right? So being able to make it so that all those cards essentially do nothing, because I think the only cards you have that can really be hit by spell trap removal are Phantom Knight, Shade Brigandine, and Premature Burial. And I guess if you set your quick play spell trap removal, they can hit that. But the amount of like actual cards that you care about that they can hit with back removal is so minimal.
And
that-
I've played against
Cyclone
Dragon Rulers
kind of
before and drawn into like 2 pieces of spell trap removal, and I'm just extremely sad because it's like a neg 2.
Yeah. So it essentially gives you that handicap that you need because your deck is a bit less consistent and a bit slower to roll into the advantage because you have to mill into it. And I definitely think there's a worthwhile trade-off there, but if you're going to not blanket, you really have to commit to having a lot of that stuff. And at that point, I almost think it's worth maybe playing some actual back row instead of Phantom Knight, Shade Brigandine, like Torrential Tribute and Solemns and Paleozoic Dinomischus or Phoenix Wing Windblast, because you can actually afford the discard in this deck.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, because the payoff for cards like Future Fusion is big, but I think that it's much more tangible benefit of just blanking that spell trap removal that, especially in like a 30 or 35 card deck, they're very likely to be drawing into within the first couple turns.
All right, well, let's go into Pacifis with Mono Blutron.
Ooh. Oh, well, you can't allow me to speak unencumbered. Hey, everyone. Time for me to talk about my number one favorite deck, the love of my life, the fruit of my loins, Pacifist Control. If anyone would like to get out like any long screams or, like a string of expletives, now is the time.
Yeah, dear God, this deck has haunted our meta for far too long.
Extremely annoying. One thing that has allowed Pacifist to flourish so well is that it's consistently undervalued by both deck builders, players in-game, and people who run tournaments. I won't name names, but the reason is because Pacifist the Phantasm City is an extremely powerful trap card in which it convinces people they will be playing against a deck full of normal monsters, equip spells, and Phantasm Spiral Dragon, when really it's most at home in a control shell. This is the control shell that I ran in March, updated for the newer ban list because a couple of individual cards were hit as a result of consistent Pacifist meddling. I'll explain the card choices real quick and then tell everyone how they have to beat it. So it's running a couple of different engines. One problem with Pacifist is that without any sort of proactive game plan, it very quickly devolves into, I have set a Pacifist, now my opponent is going to literally take no action that triggers it for the remainder of the game in an effort to prevent me from getting a token. And if they do that, you lose. So you do have to play stuff that does things. That's why I've included the Weathery monsters. There is a fair amount of incidental synergy. They can get themselves off of your side of the board so that you're free to activate your Phantasm Spiral traps. They special summon themselves on your opponent's turn or on your turn if you activate them during your opponent's turn. So if you just summon them, don't use their effect, and then use it on your opponent's turn, your Pacifist is alive. They protect your face-up spell and traps. This is Weather Painter Aurora specifically. She only protects the tribal ones, but those are the ones you want to protect most anyway. And routinely, they're strong enough to win games on their own. They help you win battle with the Thundery Weathery pattern, and they help you search cards with Snowy Weathery pattern, which is always pretty important for a control deck. I've also included the... Oh, go ahead.
It's also kind of the opposite philosophy of the Dragon Rulers, right? That you have so many targets for spell and trap removal that they can't have it for all of them.
Right, yeah. The idea is, in a format with like Super Buddy Force decks becoming ever popular, I think it's not unlikely that people may be bored out of like MSTs or like Twin Twisters in favor of like Cosmic Cyclone and HSD and nothing else. And if that's the case, you know, it's pretty good to have as many targets for spell and trap removal as possible. I'm also playing a very small tour guide engine. Tour guide is just extremely strong, and Sangan searches snow weathery painter, so you know, there it is. I mean, that's the entirety of the deck. Everything else is effectively a control card, designed to either negate the effect of an opponent's monster, so you still get the Pacifis activation without, you know, actually losing the game, or a piece of removal so that you can deal with the monsters that outscale your 2000 attack normal monster tokens. If you are playing against Pacifis, have some things you should do. This is usually where players get the most frustrated because the ways to play against this specific deck are super unintuitive. Like normal extend as hard as possible to overwhelm the control deck style strategies bow down to this one, because doing that adds more control cards to your hand that are immediately activatable. So instead, just do what you can to prevent them from plussing. Your monsters like outclass their removal just by virtue of you having more than them. Like you saw the DragonRuler list is playing like, I think 18 guys that you can just summon and get attacking with. Don't be afraid to like normal summon an Alexandrite dragon and poke them for a couple of turns. It's pretty good unless they have figured out a way to either remove that monster and they only have so much removal, or find the proactive engine. The second is you can fire effects off, but do it when Pacifis is off. Now, Pacifis is routinely off, especially in the Weathery Painter version of this deck. If they're splashing an extra engine, whenever they summon an effect monster in any capacity, if it's being special summoned by the effect of a Weathery monster, for example, if they normal summon it, like a Planet Pathfinder or a Tour Guide or something, then Pacifis is off for the entire turn. So get your effects in then.
It's also off during the damage step.
Right, yes. It is off during the damage step, so cards that trigger when they're sent to the graveyard by battle are fantastic. The Gradles specifically, I have lost many games to one of the Gradles taking the Phantasm Spiral token and then beating me with it. There are tons of ways around this card. And then, if all else fails, you really can just wait to activate important things until you have Mystical Space Typhoon. Like Meep said, there are like 6 in the format that are playable, and decks are routinely playing upwards of 4. If you have to pass for 2 or 3 turns to find one, it's not unlikely that you'll be alive, especially if you're playing any sort of reactive card.
Pacifist does not put on much pressure.
It certainly does not.
Not without Mech Knights anymore, at least.
Yeah, may they rest in peace, and also thank God they are resting in peace.
Mm-hmm. And this deck more than... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to mention that Pacifist, more than any other deck we're showcasing today, is more of a shell than anything. And you don't have to run Weatheries with this. You can run... I know you tried Frogs and Volcanics before, and...
It's been through a lot of iterations. Mech Knights, Frogs, Volcanics. I've tried just normal monsters and like Dragoons to actually execute the normal Pacifist game plan. It is certainly quite flexible, but about the 15 to 20 cards that represent Pacifist, the cards that find it, and the best traps in the game are probably non-negotiable.
Mm-hmm.
And then the number one thing I can recommend to you is read all of the cards that your opponent is activating if they're playing this deck. Pacifist is, I think, responsible for the most judge calls of any card of all time.
Probably.
In the TCG, and it was playable for like a month when it first came out. It was like every single call during the middle of Zodiac format was for the one jerk playing with this field spell. Do not Regeki the token. It will bring the token back. Don't waste removal on the token unless it's in the damage step. If they normal summon or even special summon a normal monster before normal summoning or special summoning an effect monster, it will trigger the effect of Pacifist to search from deck because it's mandatory regardless of if there is or is not a target remaining. So if they start their turn by, for example, normal summoning a normal monster, it'll trigger the effect of Pacifis and turn off their ability to special or normal summon an effect monster for the remainder of the turn. So, like, don't let your opponents cheat you if they sequence improperly. And if they're not searching for the Pacifist traps, because the best one is now semi-limited and you would never splash for a second copy of Phantasm Spiral Power, you can pretty easily make reads about the cards in their hand and set on their field if you've, for example, only seen Phantasm Spiral Battle and they have ceased searching.
Great.
So it's a deck that rewards you for spending a lot of time in the tank, reading the cards, evaluating the board state, and making reads on your opponent.
And where would you rate this deck in the meta?
It's hard to say. It's consistently done well, even in formats where it really shouldn't have. The Mech Knight Altergeist format, for example, was one where I did not expect this deck to be good. I think this deck is just as good as trap cards are. Like, if the trap cards in Trinity end up being as powerful as they are now for the conceivable future, I could see this being like the mainstay control shell. I would probably say this deck is slightly more powerful than DragonRulers, but not by a lot. There are more powerful things you can be doing in the format. Dedicated OTK strategies kind of eat this alive occasionally. Pendulum strategies are a particular problem for it because you really only have access to so much spell and trap removal, and they have infinite resources. But aside from those two decks, matchups that are certainly winnable, I think everything else is pretty good for this strategy.
Cool. I will get into rank 4 now. We're going to see a lot of similar cards that we did with the DragonRuler list, because he was also running a rank 4 engine. But mine's much more dedicated to just summoning a rank 4 every single turn. That's basically the idea. And that's often enough to... If you can turn 1 summon a rank 4 and you have a trap set, that'll usually just win you games. Because the rank 4s are really, really good tempo plays, and Tornado Dragon will tear apart back row decks, especially with... in my deck, I've got the Trickstar engine, a really small one of just Candina and Light Stage in order to specifically beat out combo decks and back row decks, because pendulums often do a lot of searching, and the idea is that Reincarnation will basically act as a searchable Mind Crush. And because it's a Highlander format, Reincarnation's really, really good, because
it's so strong.
Yeah, once those cards are banished, they're basically gone. There are certain situations where I side out the Trickstar engine, and it's pretty much only against Dragon Rulers, because Reincarnation triggers the Rulers, and they don't have back row for Light Stage to pop, so it's kind of pointless.
Exciting to plus your opponent for free.
Yeah, exactly. But so for the most part, you want to do the standard gameplay is normal summon, special summon, make a rank 4. So about half the cards are either rank enablers by either special summoning themselves or special summoning another rank 4, a level 4, or they're just general good stuff level 4 cards like Thunder King Ryo. Like, Thunder King Ryo doesn't specifically do anything for this deck besides just be a good level 4. Because one thing the deck needs is cards to follow up a rank 4, and Thunder King Ryo is perfect for that. Sitting on like Rebellion Dragon with a Thunder King Ryo behind him is really hard for some decks to deal with.
The exact kind of thing Mono mentioned. He was afraid of people sitting on.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you normal summon a Thunder King Ryo against me, I will concede.
Yeah. And then you've got some pretty fun combos with like Zephyros, where you like play chicken game, draw a card, Zephyros is back in your hand, draw another card, or bounce Call of the Haunted, bounce Premature. Which one of the things I really like about this deck is the all the different like card interactions and combos that you can include, because you just the standard for a card in your deck is just level 4, so you can include any like cool level 4 that works. Like, I'm including Sacred Crane because I have a lot of ways to special summon from the grave, or just special summon from hand, and Sacred Crane gets me a plus off of that. Um, I also included a gadget engine because they are just +1s that are level 4, which is good. The main thing you want to do is just get Darkworm in the grave. Once you get Darkworm in the grave, you're set because all you have to do is normal summon a level 4 and you have a rank 4 with Darkworm. One problem the deck runs into is sometimes you'll like Castell something, and then Castell just gets stuck on the board as a 2000 beater that doesn't do anything. So there's a couple ways to get around this. One is the Nightmares. The Nightmares have made this a lot easier to deal with because you can just normal summon, make a Nightmare, and continue on. Or there's also Nefarious Archfiend, Eater of Nefariousness, which will blow up the XYZ and then summon itself, and then you just have to normal summon your next turn. It also special summons itself off of the Fairy Tale cards, which is really good. I'm also including Card of Safe Return because, again, there's a lot of ways to summon from grave, and it's free pluses, and you need something to draw into your traps because an XYZ every turn is not quite enough to finish out games. Because decks that are faster than you will just run you over without a second thought. And there's not enough like defensive XYZ cards to really not get run over by like a DragonRuler deck. So you need the traps to back you up. This variant isn't running a huge amount of traps because it's very like anti-control focused. But my April topping list did run like the Trap Tricks Perflasia in order to like have just an XYZ you can sit on to stem the bleeding from like Dragon Rulers and like disrupt them and then eventually wear them down.
Perflasia as the baby Baguska.
Yeah, basically, it's boneless Baguska. My side, I've got the ABC engine. I found that ABCs are really good because this is also a field spell centric deck. So you can search the field spell, and then it creates a 2-turn ABC Dragon Buster. The problem I had with it was in testing against faster decks, it's either too slow, or if I do get it off, I don't have enough things to discard from my hand for a Buster. So I end up siding it in against slower decks where I will have cards in my hand because there's more turns in the game, and where I can afford to just sit on some cards and wait for the ABC to happen.
But routinely, you're just minusing yourself in the interest of making rank 4s, so it's kind of hard to ensure that you're going to have material.
Right. But cards like Card of Safe Return and Sacred Crane can definitely help with the minusing. Same with the Gadget engine. The actual rank 4s I chose to include are like Lavolo Chain, which is really, really good for like dumping Snow, dumping Darkworm, dumping Nefariousness, all of your good graveyard base level 4s. Exiton is the best card in the game by far. It will just win games against decks like Pacifis if they don't have a negate. You just blow up their board and they lose, and it's really good for tempo swings, obviously.
It's also good because you're like hiding resources in grave where the Excite on IRS can't see them, so you can activate it even if you're actually kind of ahead because you have Darkworm set up and you have a gadget in hand, but you're technically under on cards, so you can activate Exit.
Yeah, because this deck uses the graveyard as a second hand, blowing up the field is not a big deal for you, whereas against other decks, it'll hurt them a lot. Utopia and in Trinity, you can't summon Utopia the Lightning in one turn because of the summon limit. So you have to activate like Call to Haunted during your opponent's end phase or Fairy Tale Snow, something like that. But that routinely happens with this deck. That's not an issue I've ever run into.
Let me just chime in that you can summon Utopia Lightning in one turn with the help of one Mr. Rescue Rabbit because he summons monsters.
Rescue Rabbit is the one way. Or there's probably a couple other vanilla combos with like Unexpected Die, but for the most part, Utopia Lightning is hard to summon.
If you're not a silly jerk, then yeah, it's hard for you to summon him.
Or if you just run Phantom Knight Shade Brigandine, which is for less trap-oriented builds.
The other card, yeah, I Shade Brigade is really good. The problem is just that I really don't think that rank 4 can stand on its own, and I think it needs like some back row in order to make sure you don't just get run over. I also include Evil Swarm Ouroboros because he's one of the few Xyzs that can present like a constant threat every turn, and it's something they have to deal with immediately, or you're just going to hand loop them.
Like an often overlooked but extremely powerful card.
I don't really I haven't really seen it in any other decks, but I also really like to meme, so I run dumb cards like Ouroboros.
You can also make it from the ABC tag out, right?
Yeah, you can make it immediately from the ABC tag out.
That's so strong. Wow.
Yeah, it's a good card. And yeah,
that might just be. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, in the meta, I think it's I call it about tier 2. It's definitely not the most threatening deck in the meta, but I think rank 4 is just like a staple of Trinity. Like it's been around since the beginning, and it's I think if there's a meta where rank 4 isn't viable, something's wrong. Like because it just
seems like one of the fairest things you can be doing.
It is very fair because it like the most unfair part is like Fairy Tale Snow, which people hate, but I also hated for a very long time. But
Darkworm is kind of unfair.
And yeah, Darkworm is pretty unfair. You get a level 4 every single turn. But I mean, if you're playing against this deck, definitely hit the Darkworm. If they summon Darkworm, definitely if they leave it on the board, kill it immediately, or use your Dynamiscus on it. Use your bad aims on it. Any quick effect removal, use it on Darkworm.
Because so it gets stuck in the extra deck instead of recurring to grave.
Right, because it's a pendulum card.
That's the main disadvantage, right? Is because like if they don't Xyz with it, then it's gone unless you're playing an actual pendulum deck.
Which is really the best way to deal with the deck, because then they're going -1 every turn instead of just going like +0 to make a rank 4. Because Darkroom's just a 1-card engine by himself, just summoning a level 4 every turn, which is really good. But yeah, anyone else have anything else to add on that?
I think you covered it.
All right.
Ban Exciton, I guess I'd say.
Let's not do that. Exciton's.
I tried to hit Exciton before, but y'all wouldn't listen, huh?
No, Exciton's fine. Come on. Speaking of decks that are totally not fine, though, Punk, you want to talk about Metalfoes?
Oh boy, do I! Yeah, so this is a deck about cheating. Every turn you have to sit and stare at your screen for like 5 minutes, and then you figure out the way to cheat, and then you do it.
And then you win by going into time, correct? You're ahead on life points.
No, I just cheat and win instantly.
No, he actually includes Upstart Goblin. He can't do that.
Yeah, I'm a fool. Anyways, I play every single Metalfoe monster because seeing the pop effect every game means we can access the spell trap lineup and start getting like value off of the more like situational cards, or just like cards we're left on the board and we have nothing to do. We can just pop something, and having access to them is spectacular, which is also the reason I'm playing a second Summoner's Art, which can search Volflame alongside some other cards, such as Odd Eyes Arc Pendulum Dragon, which
this card is so strong.
Yeah, it's got 2700 attack. It's actually quite important to have big beaters in this deck. And the Odd Eyes engine is him, the regular Odd Eyes, to help us search out key cards, and one Odd Eyes Persona Dragon, which is a low scale. And then, of course, Spiral Flame Strike, which searches both level 7s, and Sky Iris, which will pop a card to add 1, which we can, of course, use. Like, we can use the Metalfoe's combination. If we have a draw in a combination in a Metalfoe, we can use it with Bow Baboon. It's basically just another Metalfoe, but for another archetype. So that is pretty great. They're also searchable by Duelist Alliance, which can also search Pendulum Call. What a segue. We have the Magician engine, which is 1 Timebreaker, 1 Harmonizing, and Purple Poison and Black Fang. And Black Fang is obviously and very clearly the worst, but you have to play a certain concentration in order to consistently be able to use Pendulum Call. Oh yeah, I'm also playing a Dragon Pulse. You really want to be able to use Pendulum Call to get Harmonizing, and then use Harmonizing's effect to summon from deck. And that requires you to play a certain amount. So even though one of them's a actual vanilla and one of them has a pretty mediocre effect, I still have to play them for like this engine to come together.
Do you ever end up using the pendulum effect of Dragon Pulse?
Dragon Pulse, I don't think I've ever had. I've used Black Fang a couple of times to help me out decay, or like revive a Violet Poison, or a Focus Cannon from grade.
Well, that's disappointing, I gotta tell you.
Yeah, I've literally never used its pendulum effect. It's mainly there, so you can get it off of Harmonizing Magician, and then go into Ignister without using all your summons. Of course, we can still cheat by pendulum summoning other cards alongside Harmonizing, since one pendulum summon only counts as one summon if there's any effect monsters in it, and 0 summons if there are no effect monsters in it. Another reason why we are running so many vanillas. Then we have the Mythical Beast stuff, which is Jackal, Cerberus, and Garuda. Garuda is a bad Eccentric, but Eccentric's a good card, and I really want another search target for Cerberus, which is just a brick. Like we would have to tribute summon it if we don't pop it in the scale to search. But just popping Cerberus in the scale, popping it to search Jackal, and popping Jackal to special summon it is just very strong. Getting out a 2800 beater, which you can oftentimes make indestructible, is just great.
Yeah, really hard for some decks to deal with.
Yeah, especially without like hard minusing for them. And then I'm just like, okay, I spent one card on that, and I got Jackal in my extra deck. I'm not very sad about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the strength of Garuda, especially because of how hard Pendulum dies to certain back row on their initial setup, makes it so that spending the one card to get Garuda is oftentimes really worth it and can help kill that crucial trap card that would otherwise lose you the game.
Yeah, I'm also playing Eccentric, MST, and Cosmic Cyclone for that. And the only reason I'm not playing Twin Twister is because you need 2 cards to set up scales, so you can't really spend 2 cards on removing spell traps that often.
I have to ask, I mean, the standout card for me in this deck is Supply Squad.
Oh, yeah.
What's up with that?
You set up Supply Squad, they don't want to kill your monsters. You set up Supply Squad, you pop your stuff with Metalfoes, you get free pluses. And are they gonna have spell trap removal enough to trying to kill your scales?
Yeah.
No.
I've played a lot against this deck, and when Punk plays Supply Squad, it's very much like, okay, do I want him to stop plussing, or do I want him to not have scales? But the problem is this deck always has scales. Like it's very, very hard to actually like permanently remove their scales without Zaphion. And so Supply Squad kind of just sits there.
Yeah. I was extremely frustrated playing against this deck anytime I've ever played against it in tournament or testing about how hard it is to get Punk to fade a draw step, just draw dead for one turn, until I looked at the list and realized it is literally impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Every card in here is a scale.
Yeah, most of my cards are either scales, scale searchers, Baboon, or stuff I try to get out of my deck as soon as possible in the case of the Metalfoe spell traps.
Yikes.
The one brick I've added since playing it earlier, in March mainly, is Master Cerberus, which is a brick, and there's also AAPacifis, which I also used to run. These are just bricks in the late game if you don't have scales up. They're like very hard bricks, but the payoff is big enough that you do it anyways.
Mm-hmm. Because AAPacifis is just a free negate along with whatever your other plays were that turn.
Yeah, sometimes I'll just Pendulum summon AAPacifis alone, even if I have a bunch of other stuff in hand, and they'll have to solemn it.
Yeah, because the best way to deal with pendulums is just have a solemn, because they pendulum summon, you solemn, all the cards go to grave, and then you win. But if you pendulum summon just Avian, they have to solemn that, because Avian's too good.
Yeah, like before I started using this build, people's conventional wisdom against Trinity pendulums were like, oh, you killed their scales and you solved the pendulum. And I basically just built an entire deck around, nah, that's not enough. A lot of the scales float, a lot of the Metalfoes get stuff that are gonna get me a new scale next turn. I have tons of searchers, like my stuff pluses me all the time.
Pendulum Call
And
just makes your
occasionally I'll
scales
just
immune.
break out huge damage if you don't do anything against me.
Yeah, that's the other thing is, like all pendulum decks, sometimes you just get a handful of monsters and you summon them all and you attack and you win.
Yeah.
You don't even have to extend into any extra deck monsters. You just go, here's an Odd Eyes Arc, here's an Apex Avian, here's a Volflame, deal with it. That's lethal.
Yeah, or like they have a huge monster on board and I have a couple of big guys and a Harmonizing, and I'll just get out an Ignister, spin it back there. I don't think my scales anymore when you're dead.
I'm getting tilted listening to this. Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
I've been playing against it for 2 weeks, trying to find a deck that works. And
if I ever play Trinity in real life, I would probably not bring this deck because I do not want to be physically assaulted.
Yeah. Next episode, I will go into detail about a deck that does beat this with some consistency.
Does anyone have like any Bitcoin? We could hire a hitman to get rid of Punk. I think that's the only way we stop this, right?
Ironically,
that is named Saphion the Time Lord.
The terrible mistake that was time baited to Unlimited is actually our one savior against this deck, because Zaphion's the only real answer to all the plussing and all the scales.
Just outplay me in the mirror. It's
written apologies.
You have to be better than me, right? Surely you're a better player than me. Just play it against me.
Yeah. So I would.
This deck is quite hard to
play. The deck is hard to play. I'll give it that. There's a lot of branching lines of play and a lot of different
never
options.
Like on the field or in the hand. Like your lines always involve getting stuff out of the extra deck, getting stuff out of your deck. Yeah.
I would ask where you think the deck is in the meta, but quite frankly, we all know this is probably the best deck.
I'm not so sure it's the best deck, but it's one of the best.
A top 3 deck for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is the. Anything else to add?
I guess I could talk a little bit about the extra deck just real quick.
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
I'm not running any of the vanilla Metalfoes fusions because you don't want to make that many fusions, and I'm not running a super poly, so I don't really need for that. I'm just running all the ones with good effects. You don't make Alcast that much in this version because we don't have full Metalfoes in this, but when you make him, you're really happy you have him. We also have Supreme King Dragon Starving Venom, known from FTKs in the TCG, but here he's usually just used either as a you just get a beater randomly, like he's 2800 beater with any 2 Dark Pendulum monsters that can get piercing very easily, and occasionally you get to do stuff like copying Ignister and win. And then I have my Synchro lineup for Harmonizing. Dawn Dragster is because she can get Time Breaker Magician, which is a decent turn 1 play. Big Eye is Big Eye. You can make him with some of the crappy level 7s like the Supreme King Gate 0. Then I have some rank 4s. I took out Exiton because really, if I'm ever making Exiton, I'm probably not winning the game because I don't have.
Let me write that down real quick. No Exiton in Punk's extra deck.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Also, blowing up your own scales would suck. So.
What I'm saying is actually quite crucial because the Metalfoes and Sky Irises can try to pop him and fail, and you get to destroy one of their cards. You don't get Search, but you get to destroy a card. It's also just good to see that. And then I have some generic links. Dual Chimera, the obscene cat we recently got, is very good for OTKs because you like normal summon a vanilla Metalfoe, link away, whatever maybe some random other Metalfoe you have in the extra monster zone, maybe like an Alcahest that's stuck there, and then you have 2 Pendulum Stones to summon to, and all your Metalfoes get an attack boost. Yeah, it's easy to bring out a lot of damage with that guy.
Yeah, also note that it's really nice for clearing the Zen mains out that you make with Bao Baboon, because that's not usually great to leave in there after 1 or 2 turns of it just sitting there.
Yeah. For sure.
So yeah, that's the Trinity Weather Report. Thanks for watching.